Good. Okay, our learning is Leila Nishmas Mendel, Mariam, Bas, Kalman, Reuven, Hanasham, Aliyah. And the last thing we spoke about was the fact that both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim agreed that a person is chayav chatas for killing something that reproduces, right? They both agree that if the thing reproduces, you're going to be chayav. There was a question about lice, because the fact that lice, quote unquote, does not reproduce. So we're on Amud Kuf Zayin Amud Beis, 107b3. 107b3, the second to last paragraph on the page. Okay, Kuf Zayin Amud Beis. Yeah, just I don't even know where to show you, but it's like we have a lot of ground to cover. Okay, so let's see. Harei Parosh, the case of a flea. Depar Varave, you see that? The case of a flea, it reproduces. Vitanya, and yet we learned Hatzad Parosh b'Shabbos, a person who traps a flea on Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer Mechayev. Rabbi Eliezer says that you are going to be liable. Rabbi Yeshua Poter, and Yeshua says you are exempt. So we see Rabbi Yeshua holds that a person is exempt from hunting for trapping a flea. Right, so you just said that everyone agrees that something which is reproduces, everyone's going to agree or chayiv, and over here, Yeshua says that a person is exempt. So Amar Rav Ashi says, what kind of question is this? Tzeda ahariga karamis. You're asking contradiction between the laws of trapping and the laws of killing. Ad kan lo pli Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua ella Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, the ones we just quoted a second ago, they don't disagree. Ella demar savar, one holds from the page davar she'in b'mino nitzad chayav. One holds that you have to be that in order to be chayav for something, it has to be something that species normally is trapped. Umar savar pater, and one holds that in such a case, if it's not normally trapped, then you're going to be exempt. Avalinya hariga for Rabbi Yeshua moda. When it comes to killing, even Rabbi Yeshua would agree. In other words, we were discussing until now about killing, and what we said is that everyone agrees that as long as an animal reproduces, you're going to be chayav for killing, and that's going to be true across the board. You just asked a question from a case of hunting. By hunting, if you recall, we had a machlokas, right? We discussed this from context of bees and mosquitoes, and they're arguing about if there's a discussion or debate. If a species is something which is not normally hunted, will you be chayav or not? A flea, and one opinion says yes, one opinion says no. A flea is something which people don't go on flea hunts, right? It's not something which people are normally doing, and therefore one opinion says you're exempt, the other opinion says no. Anytime you hunt anything, you're going to be chayav. But that's a discussion about hunting. When it comes to killing, everyone would agree you're going to be chayav, right? And therefore, don't ask me contradiction between the two. Okay, let's go further. Hatzadan litzorech chayav. The Mishnah told us that a person who traps these animals for a positive purpose, you're going to be chayav, and one who traps them without a positive purpose is going to be exempt. Okay, so again, a person who traps these animals, we're talking about the shratzim over here, the 8 shratzim that were mentioned in the beginning of this Mishnah, in the beginning of the parak, and this Mishnah. One who traps them for a positive purpose is going to be chayav. A person who traps them for not a positive purpose. So positive purpose mean I want them. A non-positive purpose means, like, let's say, I don't want them. I want to get rid of them, right? So a positive purpose means a constructive purpose. You're going to be chayiv. A non-positive purpose, you are going to be exempt. Ask the Gemara, Man Tana, who is the Tana who distinguishes between a positive purpose and a non-positive purpose? I'm Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Rabbi Shimon. This is Rabbi Shimon. Amar Malacha Shein Shricha Legufa Pater Leha. Right? We have this Rabbi Shimon throughout the Masechta who says that when you're doing something which is not needed for itself, right? The exact class example is taking a corpse out of a house, right? If my goal is I want to get it somewhere else, that's a positive purpose. If my goal is I don't want it here, that's a malacha shein shricha legufa, right? So similarly over here too, if I'm trapping it because I want the animal, that's a positive purpose, and therefore I'm going to be chayiv. If I just don't want it here, that's something which you'd be exempt for, and Rav Shimon is the one who has this opinion, okay? Ika demasni la'aha. There are those who teach Rav's teaching in regards to a different halacha, and we saw this earlier. Hamefis morsa b'Shabbos, person who lances a boil, pops a pimple on Shabbos, im lasos lopeh, if the goal is to make an opening for it, chayiv, you're going to be chayiv. Im lahotzi men alacha, if the goal is to just remove the pus from it, your goal, meaning the malacha over here is building. You're making a hole in a pimple. So if the goal is to make the hole, then you're doing it for a constructive purpose. You're doing it legufa. But if the goal is to take what's in it out, and the only way to get what's in it out is if there's a hole, there has to be some way, some passageway for it to get out, then pater. Mantana, who is a tan of this, I'm Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Rav Shimon, this Rav Shimon Malacha Shein Shricha Legufa Pater Leha, who has this opinion, who says the malacha which is not needed for its defined purpose, you are not liable for it. Vigna Masni Laha, and there are those who teach Rav's statement saying that it's Rav Shimon in the context of a third halacha, and we also saw this halacha recently. Hatzah nachash b'Shabbos, person who traps a snake on Shabbos. Imis asik bo shlo yishchenu, if the goal of trapping it is to prevent the animal from biting that snake from biting you, pater. In the refuah, if the goal is for a medical cure, chayiv, you're going to be chayiv. Mantana, who is the Tana, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Shimon, he this is all, again, all these three are the opinions of Rav Shimon, who holds malacha shein shriich legufa, you are exempt. Okay, now we're going to move on to discussion about fish and Shabbos. Amar Shmuel, hashole dag min hayam. Person takes a fish from the sea. Kevan sheyavesh ba kesela. As soon as there's a dry spot on it, the size of a sela. Okay, a sela is a coin. Chayiv, you're going to be chayiv for taking its life. Right? What kills a fish? A lack of water. And therefore, if you take a fish out of the water, at what point are you going to be chayiv for nitzilas neshama? For which is a prohibition. For what point did you kill the fish? When there is a dry spot on it, the size of a sela. Amrav Yossi bar Avin uvein san pirav. It's not just a dry spot anywhere, it's specifically between the fins. That's where the dry spot is significant. That's where the fish needs its water, and therefore if the dry spot is between its fins, that's when you have a dry spot the size of a sela, the coin, by its fins, that's when you're going to be chayav for having killed it. Meaning the point is, if it's before that, if it's just a little bit dry, and you throw it back in, okay, you didn't do anything. But once it hits that spot, even if you throw it back in, you're already chayav achatos because you've, so to speak, killed the animal. Amar Rav Ashi lo tema yavesh mamish. Don't think that has to actually be dry. Elafilu to avad rire, even if it forms drops of slime. Okay, basically that's when it starts to get dry, meaning it's liquidy. Slime is the fish is slimy between its when it's fully liquidy, it's just surrounded by the water, and then fully dry, but there's a space in between. When it's slimy, at that point, it's already considered dead. Okay, another halacha similar to this whole discussion. Amar Mar bar Hamdure Amar Shmuel. Hoshid yad l'mei behema. A person goes ahead and extends their animal into an animal. A person extends their hand into an animal. V'dildel ubar shebemeah, and dislocate the embryo. In other words, perform an abortion of sorts. Okay, chayav. The person is going to be chayav. Okay, my timer. What's the halacha? What's the reason for this liability? Amarava bar Hamdure asperli. Bar Hamdure explained it to me. Lav Amrav Sheshes. Didn't Rav Sheshes teach us? Haimad tells kashusa mehizmi vehige. A person who detaches hops from briars and brambles. Let's say you have thorns and you have these berries attached to them, and you detach them. You're chayav. Why? Michai mishum oker davar migidulo. You're liable for uprooting something from its place of growth. Okay, so even though the hops were not attached to the ground, they're attached to these thorns and thistles, which are, meaning, let's say you have you've separated, you cut off some thorns. Okay, you're holding like a loose thorns, right? And then you go ahead and you rip off the berries from those thorns. You're going to be chayiv on Shabbos. Why? Because you're liable for taking something away from its place of growth. So hachinami here too, when you dislocate the embryo, you're mechai mishum oker dav migdula. You're liable for uprooting something from its place of growth, even though it's not detached from the ground. That's the novelty. In other words, what the chiddush over here is that we know until now, if I take an apple off of a tree, I'm going to be chayiv. But here we're saying that even if it's not even if it's not from the ground, if I'm detaching something from its place of growth, I'm still going to be chayiv. Okay, another application of this principle. Amar Abaye Haiman de Talash Pitra. We're on Kuf Chas Amud Aleph now. Pitra miuna dechat. A person takes fungus from the handle of a pitcher. Okay, let's say you have a pitcher and there's fungus growing on it. Okay, you're liable for uprooting something from its place of growth. Right? In other words, the fungus is not attached to the ground, but the fungus starts to develop on your pitcher handle, and you start to take it off. You're going to be chayiv. Okay. However, the Gemara asks, Masav Rav Oshia challenges this based on a Mishnah. Hatolish me'atzitz nakav chayiv. A person who plucks a plant from a flower pot that has a hole in it, you're going to be liable for being oker, for tolesh, for separating it. Pater. But if it's a flower pot that does not have a hole in the bottom, you are going to be exempt. So you see that it would seem to be that unless something is attached to the ground, you are not going to be chayiv, right? The fact that it says if it has a hole, you're going to be chayiv. If it has no hole, you're going to be exempt. So the Gemara says, Hasam lav hainu revise. No, there's a difference. By the plant, it's not the usual place of growth. Where does a plant normally grow? In the ground. And therefore, when it's growing in a non-perforated plant, or when it has a flower pot that does not have a hole, that's abnormal, and therefore you're going to be exempt in that case. Hacha, in all the cases we're talking about over here, fungus, in the case of the berries, in the case of the fetus, all those things, that's its usual place of growth. And that's the bottom line halacha. The bottom line halacha is if you separate something from where it's growing, whether or not it's attached to the ground, you're going to be chayav. So if you on Shabbos want to go ahead and you see some fungus or some ivy growing on some, on something, and you start scraping it off, you're going to be chayav for being okay. That's a chiyuv isur daraisa, because even though it's not growing from the ground, since it's its normal place of growth, you are going to be chayav.
Whether you did it with some sort of shinoi or not.
Anytime you do anything with it'll be a derabanan, but it'll still be it's a deraisa with making it and turning it into a derabanan by doing it with the shinoi.
We wouldn't apply this doing it type of situation.
Right. So it depends what you're. Okay, you'd have to ask them. I mean, it depends what you're doing it for. It depends what you're trying to get rid of it. It would seem like it's stricha legufa. Right. Okay. Chayva oaf. The Gemara says the Mishnah said that if a person goes ahead and wounds a beast or a bird, you're going to be chayiv. And now the Gemara goes on to a bit of a tangent. We discussed earlier about the shratzim, whether or not they have hides, right? We saw machlokas, whether or not we saw a discussion about the fact that, according to most of some opinions, and maybe all opinions, with some discussion about whether or not those shratzim, the mice, and now all those different animals, whether we consider their skin to be considered a hide, like thick enough, right? Which with different ramifications. So Amar Rav Huna, and now we're going to talk about this in the context of a bird. He said, Amar Rav Huna says, Kosvin tefillin al gabe or shel of tahar. A person's allowed to write tefillin on the hide of a kosher bird. Okay, on the hide of a kosher bird. This is not done practically, but technically, theoretically, you could write tefillin on the hide of a kosher bird. Rav Yosef, my kamash milan. What's he teaching us? De isla or. He's teaching us that a bird is considered to have a hide. In other words, once we know it has a hide, then you could write tefillin on it, because tefillin, as we'll see soon, can be written on anything which is kosher. So, is he teaching us that a bird is considered to have hide? Tanina. It was already learned in our Mishnah, which says hachovel bahen chayav. The Mishnah said that if you bruise a bird, you're going to be chayav. Now, the only way you're going to be chayav for bruising a bird is because a bird has a hide. So, why does he have to teach us this? In other words, what's the novelty over here? Once we have our Mishnah over here, Masech Shabbos, which says if you bruise a bird, you're going to be chayav, then by definition we treat it as it has a parchment, as if it's a hide, and then obviously you're allowed to write a tefillin on it. So Malavaya, no. He's teaching us a great deal. Dim masnisan havamina. If we would just have our Mishnah, I would have said that although a bird has a hide, kema de isbe nikve lo. Since it's full of holes, why is a bird hide full of holes? Any thoughts? Feathers, right? The feathers puncture the skin, and therefore, even once you pluck the feathers, it has all these tiny little holes. So therefore, you would say it's not valid for tefillin. It's not appropriate. Kamash Milan, it's okay. Why? As they say in the West, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, kol nekev shadiyo overas alav. Any hole over which the ink passes, in a nekev is not a hole. The holes of the feathers are so tiny that when you write, the ink of tefillin, the ink of the Sefer Torah is very thick, and therefore when you write on it, it doesn't fall into the hole. It kind of goes over the hole, and therefore the holes are so small that it's not significant enough to invalidate using birds' hide. But the point is that from our Mishnah we know it has hide. But what Rav Yosef is coming, what Rav Huna is coming to teach us is that even though it has holes, it's not invalid from using it for tefillin. Okay. Meisri Rav Zera asked a question. The fact that a bird's skin is classified as hide, he now asks the question. It's really a question that could have been asked on our Mishnah. Meisri Rav Zera bichnafav, regarding a bird ola offering. Okay, so what is it? Ola is a type of korban which is totally consumed on the mizbeach. You bring the whole korban, almost the whole korban, on the whole animal on the mizbeach, and the Torah says regarding a bird ola that it's burnt with its feathers. So what does it mean, bichnafav? What is it coming to teach us? Lahachsher sa'or. To teach us that the bird's ola, that the ola bird, its skin is burnt on the mizbeach. Ask the Gemara. V'sol kadaydach orhu. And if you want to say it's hide, heichim mirabi lakra. Why would the Torah include it? In other words, what the question is like this: by an ola of a cow, an ola of an animal, you do not burn the skin. You do not put the skin on the mizbeach. Okay, you take the skin off. So why would the Torah? So the principle is that the hide, the skin, does not go on the mizbeach. So why would it be by a bird that the skin does go on the mizbeach? It would seem to say that a bird does not have skin, right? In other words, if the starting point is an animal, sorry,
the feathers being the skin.
No. The hide that we're learning from with its feathers to teach, meaning not just with its feathers, but the thing that holds the feathers, i.e. the skin. So the fact that the Torah is telling us to put the skin on the mizbeach, it would seem to indicate that the skin is not considered hide, because we know from the other animals that are brought on the mizbeach for an ola that the skin / hide is not brought on. Elamaya must be that the hide of the bird is not considered hide, rather it's considered flesh, right? This was the whole discussion earlier. Is skin considered, it depends on the type of animal, is skin separate or the same? The fact that it's included would imply that it's not hide. Amalei Abaye, what are you talking about? Arhu, it is hide, v'rachman arabye. And the point is that we learn from the pasuk to include it. In other words, you can't bring a question from here. You're right. It's true that there's a big difference. By an animal ola offering, the skin is not brought on the mizbeach. You're going to ask me, why is it by a bird that the skin is brought? Does that teach me that the skin is part of the flesh? No. The Torah goes out of its way to say include it. The fact that it says include it is to say that even though it's hide, the Torah says to go ahead and include it. Okay? Ikeda Amri, there's another version of this discussion. According to this version, he is proving the fact that the skin is hide. Why? Bechnafav, the pasuk says with its feathers, the rabbos is to include the skin of the bird in an ola offering. If you say that it's classified as hide, that's why I need the pasuk to go ahead and include it. But if you want to say that it's not hide, why would I need a pasuk to include it? In other words, he's taking the same discussion and using it as a proof. The fact that the Torah goes out of its way to include it would seem to say that it really should not be there because it's really hide. The fact that the Torah has to go out of its way to say, and include the skin, is teach me that it's really hide. Okay, which is like exactly like our Mishnah said. Amalei Abaye says, no, olam emelach lav arhu. Maybe really it's not hide. You can't bring a proof because maybe it's not hide. Ve'itzrich, and yet the Torah still has to come and include it. So I would have thought, kiven de isbe pirtze, since it's full of punctures. Because of the feathers, ma'is, therefore it's too repulsive to go on the mizbeach. Kamash malan, therefore the pasuk which comes to include it is coming to teach us that it still goes up on the mizbeach. So the point is, you can't necessarily bring a proof from that pasuk, but the bottom line is we certainly don't have a question from that pasuk about whether or not bird skin is considered is considered hide or not. Okay. Now we're going to talk about writing tefillin on fish skin. Okay. So we talk about animal skin. Check. Kosher animal skin, yes. What bird skin? Can you? Yes. Even though it has little holes, you can. What about fish skin? Can I write tefillin on fish skin? Fish are kosher, right? So by my name, Mar Bereid Ravina Rav Nachman Yitzchak Ma lift up tefillin al gavi orshel dog tahar. Am I allowed to write tefillin on the skin of a kosher fish? Can I write tefillin on the skin of salmon? Okay. Well, let's fish lovers, okay? Amar lo. He says, Yavo Eliyahu v'yomar. If Eliyahu comes, he will tell us. So ask the Gemara, Mayim Yavo Eliyahu v'yomar. What does it mean if Eliyahu comes, he'll tell us? If it's to say whether or not they have skin, whether or not they have a hide, right? Because only if they have a hide can we use it for tefillin. He says, we see that it does have a hide. Meaning the skin of a fish is thick enough. We don't need Eliyahu to come and teach us like physical properties. Okay, so v'od hatznan, and also we learned Atmos hadag va'ora matzilim ba'olames. The bones of a fish and its skin save things from becoming tamei in the tent of a corpse. So what does that mean? Okay, let's quick halacha. If a person is, I think we've seen this before. If a person is in a if someone dies in a room, everything in that room, let's say this person were to, if there would be a corpse in this room, everything in this room becomes tamei. However, if you have certain things that are able to block, if there's something covering something, it blocks the tumah from going to what's under it. And the Gemara now is saying that the skin of a fish is enough to block things from going past it. Now, if the skin of a fish was seen as flesh, it would not be enough to prevent something from going past it. It's only if it's hide, then it's able to prevent it. So you see from this Mishnah that you see that clearly it's considered hide. So therefore, what was the question? We're not asking Eliyahu if it's hide or not. We know that. We know it's hide. Whether or not that literally means the stench has departed from it or not. Okay, so what does this mean? So the Rashi says the question is a practical question. Does the fish hide smell bad? Right? Fish doesn't smell so great. So what's it called? So the question is there still a fish smell? And therefore, if there's a fish smell, it'd be inappropriate to use it for tefillin. Now, some of the Rishonim ask that can't be the question because at the end of the day, you don't need Eliyahu to do a smell test. Ask someone who has a good sense of smell, right? That doesn't make any sense. And therefore, some say Zuama in this context means like spiritual stench, that the fish, whatever, this is a little bit more of a mystical idea, that Eliyahu should come and tell us the fish, dead fish, have some negative something, and therefore the question is there like a tumah over here or not? Bottom line is lahalacha, we do not, because the Gemara is unresolved, we do not write tefillin. It's usher to write tefillin on fish skin. Okay, but you could write tefillin again, theoretically, on bird skin. I've never seen it done, but it could be done. Okay, now we have a story. Shmuel and Karna have a yasvi aguda d'nahar malka. Shmuel and Karna were sitting on the bank of the Royal River. That's the Euphrates River. It's dubbed as the Royal River. Chazinu l'mayad kadalu v'achire. They saw the water was rising and was very busy. Okay, so and it wasn't windy, and the water was like kept on going up in big waves. So Shmuel said something's going on over here. Amalei Shmuel the Karna. Shmuel says to Karna, Gavar Rabba Kasim Amrav. It must be that someone from Israel is crossing the river right now, a very special person. V'chayish b'mei. And he must have a stomach issue. And the water's rising to greet him. What does that mean? The water's coming to rising to greet him. If he has a stomach issue, he has to relieve himself, and like over the side of the boat, and it's kind of embarrassing to do so. And people see him, so the water is rising, so that there's waves to give him a little bit of tznius, a little bit of privacy, so that no one's going to see it. So he says, Zil tehele akankane. Go and sniff his keg. What does it mean, sniff his keg? Karna was in the wine industry, but the way you smell if a wine is good, the way you tell if wine is good, you smell the keg. So basically, Shmuel was telling Karna, go smell his keg, meaning go see if he's really a scholar or not. I want to know if he's the real deal. Okay, Azal Ashkala Rav. Karna went and he met up with Rav, who is the one who is coming, okay, from Israel. Amrle, minayin shen kostin tefillin, el gabe or behema tehora. From where do you know that tefillin are not written except on the hide of an animal that's kosher? Amarlo, Dichsiv, Lamantia, Torah Hashem Beficha. The pasuk says the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. What does that mean? When you write a Torah, you write any scroll, it should be on something that you theoretically could eat. Okay, so therefore we know from there that you have to write tefillin and mezuzahs and Torah on something which could be eaten, i.e. kosher food. Asks Karna Minayin Ladamshu Adam. How do you know that blood, meaning blood that would make a woman tameh, tumas nida, is red specifically, as opposed to other colors of blood. Blood could be brown, etc., etc. How do you know it's specifically red? Shenemar, the pasuk says, "V'yiru Moav mineged es hamayim adumim kadam." Okay, pasuk says that the people of Moab saw the water from afar and appeared red like blood. Okay, minay lemila sheba'osu makom. How do we know that circumcision is performed on that place? In other words, on a male organ. Maybe it's done somewhere else. So Rav said, Nemer kan or laso. It says in regards to Mila, the pasuk or laso, his blockage. V'nemer lahalan or laso. And regarding a newly planted fruit tree, it says or laso. And it's the same word. Mala halan davar shosapri. Just like by orla, the halach of orla, by a planted fruit tree, it's something which produces fruits. Right? Orla is specifically a mitzvah that relates to trees, and trees produce fruits. Afkan, davar shosapri, so too, regarding circumcision, it's specifically in a place that reproduces. And that's from orla so. So that's how you know that the bris milah, it doesn't say specifically do it on a male organ, it says make a bris on orla so. So how do you know it's specifically over the male organ? From this Gzer Shava, from a tree which reproduces, so to the male organ. Says the Gemara, Ema Libo. What about, it could be the heart. There's a pasuk that says, Umaltem es orlas levavchem. You should cut away the blockage of your heart. And Ema Azno. Maybe it's your ear. Hine arela aznam. There's another pasuk that says your ear is blocked. In each of these cases, you see the word orla. So how do you know it's specifically the male organ? So Rav responds, done in orla so tama, mi orla so tama. In one case, by the fruit tree, it says orla so, and by bris milah, it says orla so. And so the terms are the most identical, as opposed to by the heart, it says orlas, and as opposed to the ear, it says arela, but orla so are most identical, and therefore that's the best Gzer Shava. Vein done orla so tama, me orla she'ena tama. We don't learn orla so, that expression from the word orla, which is not the same identical expression. Okay, then Rav now turns the tables. Amrle. Now Rav turns to Karna and says, "My shemach, what's your name?" Karna. He says, "My name is Karna." Amrle, Yei Rava, may it be God's will. Typically Karna be'ene, that a horn will emerge in your eye. Okay, basically he's cursing him. Okay, someone understands to be like a cataract. Basically, Rav understands that Karna over here is just grilling him. He's just testing him. He doesn't actually have these questions. He's just trying to see if he's the real deal or not. And to add insult to injury, we know that Rav is having some stomach issues, right? And here he is, and some guy's just sitting there testing him, not because he has a real question, but he's just trying to find out, is he a smart man, is he not a smart man? And in the meantime, Rav has his own needs, and therefore he goes out and he curses Karna, okay? The Gemara, the Mefarshim point out, you can't be held responsible. When a person's in a lot of pain, we don't hold a person responsible. So maybe Rav, acted inappropriately, but he's also in an incredible amount of pain over here. He's sick, and someone is driving him crazy. It's not the right thing to do. Okay, Lasof Aile Shmuel Ave. So eventually Shmuel, he heard, okay, he's a special man. He took him into his house. Ochle Nama Desar V'Chassid Ha'Hars, and he fed him barley bread and fish hash, V'Ashke Shichra, and gave him beer. V'Lo Achle Beis HaKisvei, and he didn't show him where the bathroom was. Okay, so again, everyone's like driving Rav crazy over here. He gives him all this food, which is going to make him, go to the restroom. Kihechi dilishtalshel. So he's going to become diuretic. Layat Rav Amar. Rav cursed him and said, "Man mitzar, whoever's caused me to suffer, lo lake me le b'nei, will not be survived by his sons." Okay, quite the harsh curse. And again, we can understand. We're not going to justify, but we're going to, at the same time understand he is in a lot of pain. V'chein hava, and so it was. Okay, let's go a little bit further. A tiny bit further. Kitanai. This idea of arla minayin lemila shbosum makam. How do we know that mila takes place in that place? Nemar kan arla so v'nemar lahalan arla so. Again, it's the arla so from planted fruit trees to arla so of circumcision. Malalan davar shosapri. Just as by the fruit trees, it's something which reproduces. After called kan davar shosapri, so too circumcision, it's a place that reproduces. Divrei Rabbi Yoshia. That's Rabbi Yoshia's source. Rabbi Natsan says, "Hari you omer? You don't need that gzera shava. Hari omer v'aral zachar asher lo yimal basar alaso." But the pasuk that speaks about mila, it says the blocked male. It used the word zachar. Makam shenikar ben zachros and nakvos. So you don't need gzera shava. Just from the pasuk itself, it says arla, and it says of zachar of a male, something which indicates whether the person is a male or not, and therefore that is going to be the source. Okay, we'll pick up on this tefillin, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day.